We're so glad you could make it. This is the Spiritist Path. The Gospel according to Spiritism. Chapter 5. Blessed are the afflicted. Part 2. Forgetfulness of the past. It is in vain that one objects that forgetfulness is an obstacle to taking advantage of experiences from previous lives. If God has deemed it appropriate to cast a veil over the past, it is because it must be useful. In fact, such remembrance would entail serious inconveniences. In certain cases, it could humiliate us greatly, or perhaps exalt our pride, and for that reason, interfere with our free will. In any case, it would cause an unavoidable disturbance in social relationships. A spirit is frequently reborn into the same environment in which it has already lived, and finds itself in relationships with the same individuals in order to repair the evil it did to them. If it were to recognize in them those whom it used to hate, perhaps its hatred would reawaken. In any case, it would feel humiliated in the presence of those it offended. God has given us for our advancement precisely what is necessary and what will be enough for us. The voice of conscience and our instinctive tendencies, taking from us what could harm us. On being born, human beings bring with them whatever they have acquired. They are born as they have made themselves. Each existence is for them a new starting point. It matters little for them to know what they were. If they are punished, it is because they committed evil. Their current evil tendencies are indicative of what still remains within them to be corrected. And that is what they should concentrate their attention on. For whatever has been corrected completely leaves no remaining trace. The good resolutions they have made are the voice of conscience that warns them as to what is good or evil and provides them the strength to resist their evil tendencies. Furthermore, this forgetfulness occurs only during corporeal life. Upon re-entering the spirit life, the spirit reacquires its memories of the past. Hence, forgetfulness is only a momentary interruption, similar to what occurs in earthly life during sleep, but which does not prevent our remembering on the next day what we did the day before or on preceding ones. It is not only after death that the spirit recovers the memories of its past. It can be stated that it never loses them, because experience proves that during incarnation, during the sleep of the body, and while it enjoys a certain amount of liberty, the spirit is conscious of its previous acts. It knows why it is suffering, and that it is suffering justly. Remembrance is blotted out only during the outward life of relationships. However, due to the absence of a precise memory, which might be painful and harm its social relations, it draws new strength in these moments of the soul's emancipation, if it knows how to take advantage of them. Reasons for resigning oneself. With the words, "Blessed are the afflicted, for they shall be consoled," Jesus indicates simultaneously the compensation that awaits those who suffer and the resignation that leads one to bless suffering as a prelude to healing. These words could also be translated like this: you should consider yourselves fortunate to suffer, because your pains in this world are the debt of your past wrongs. And these pains, if borne patiently while you are on earth, will save you from centuries of suffering in the future life. Hence, you should be happy because God has reduced your debt by permitting you to repay it now, which will guarantee you tranquility for the future. The one who suffers is like a debtor who owes a large sum, and to whom his creditor says, "If you will pay me today even 100th part of your debt, I will release you from the rest and you will be free. But if you don't, then I will hound you until you pay the very last cent." Would that debtor not be happier, bearing all kinds of hardships in order to free himself by paying only 100th of what he owes? Instead of complaining to his creditor, would he not be thankful? Such is the meaning of the words, "Blessed are the afflicted, for they shall be consoled." They are blessed because they are releasing themselves from their debt. And after they have done so, they will be free. However, if upon being released on the one hand, they go into debt on the other, they will never attain their freedom. Consequently, each new wrong increases the debt. For there is not even one, whatever it may be, that does not entail its obligatory and unavoidable punishment. If not today, then tomorrow. If not in this life, then in another. Among these wrongs, one must put in first place the lack of submission to God's will. Therefore, if we complain in our afflictions and do not accept them with resignation and as something deserved, if we accuse God as unjust, we contract a new debt that causes the loss of the benefit that we could have gotten from suffering. That is why it is necessary to start over, exactly as if you were to pay a creditor who has been hounding you, but then asked for the money back as a new loan. Upon re-entering the world of spirits, humans are like laborers who show up on payday. To some, the Lord will say, "Here is your pay for the days you worked." To others, the fortunate ones of earth, those who lived in idleness, who placed their happiness in the satisfactions of self-centeredness and in worldly pleasures, he will say, "Nothing is owed to you, since you received your pay while on earth. Go and begin your task again." Humans can either soften or increase the bitterness of their trials, according to the manner in which they view earthly life. Their suffering is greater if they consider its duration to be long. Consequently, those who look at things from the standpoint of the spirit life understand corporeal existence at a glance. They see it as a dot in the infinite. They grasp its brevity, and they tell themselves that this painful moment will soon be over. The certainty of a happier future that is not far off sustains and encourages them. And instead of complaining, they thank heaven for the pains that enable them to evolve. On the other hand, For those who see only corporeal life, pain seems unending to them, and it presses on them with all its weight. The result of the former way of looking at life is that it decreases the importance of the things of this world, leading humans to moderate their desires and to be content with their station in life without envying others, thereby attenuating the mental effect of the setbacks and disappointments they experience. Thus, they derive from it a calmness and resignation, as useful to the health of the body as to that of the soul. Whereas with jealousy, envy, and ambition, they willfully give in to torment, and thus increase the misery and anguish of their short existence. Suicide and insanity. The calm and resignation acquired in the manner of looking at earthly life and in the faith in the future gives the spirit a serenity that is the best preservative against insanity and suicide. In fact, it is certain that most cases of insanity are due to the troubles produced by the vicissitudes that people do not have the strength to bear. However, if due to the manner in which Spiritism enables them to regard the things of this world, they end up accepting with indifference, even joy, the reversals and disappointments that would render them desperate in other circumstances, it is obvious that this strength, which puts them above such events, protects their minds from the distresses that would jolt them otherwise. The same applies to suicide. Except for suicide committed in a state of intoxication or insanity, and which we might call unconscious, it is certain that whatever may be the particular motive, it always has discontentment as the cause. Hence, those who are sure that they will be unfortunate only for a day, and that better days will follow, easily have patience. They only become desperate if they can see no end to their suffering. What is a human lifetime compared to eternity, if not less than one day? For those who do not believe in eternity, however, for those who believe that all is over when life ends, if they are oppressed by trouble and misfortune, they see no end to them except in death. Expecting nothing, they find it very natural and even logical to shorten their miseries by suicide. Disbelief, simple doubts about the future, materialistic ideas, in other words, are the greatest incitements to suicide. They cause moral cowardice. And when men and women of science rest on the authority of their knowledge in order to try to prove to their listening or reading audience that they have nothing to hope for after death, are they not, in fact, leading them to the conclusion that if they are unfortunate, then there is nothing better for them to do than to kill themselves? What could they possibly have to say that would turn them away from this conclusion? What compensation could they offer them? What hope could they give them? None at all except nothingness. From this, one must conclude that if nothingness is the only heroic remedy, the sole prospect, then it would be more worthwhile to fall into it immediately rather than later on, and thereby suffer for less time. The propagation of materialistic ideas is, therefore, the poison that injects the idea of suicide into a large number of individuals. And those who become apostles of such ideas assume an awful responsibility. With Spiritism, however, wherein doubt is no longer allowed, one's outlook on life changes. Believers know that life goes on indefinitely beyond the grave, although in other conditions. Hence, the patience and resignation that quite naturally keep them from any thought of suicide, and hence, in some, moral courage. From this point of view, Spiritism has yet another equally positive and perhaps more decisive result. It shows us suicides themselves who come to reveal their unhappy situation and to demonstrate the fact that no one violates with impunity God's law, which forbids human beings to cut their own life short. Among suicides, the suffering, although temporary instead of eternal, is nonetheless terrible and of such a nature as to induce to reflection those who might be tempted to leave here before God has so ordained. Spiritists thus have several reasons to counterbalance the idea of suicide. The certainty of a future life in which they know that their happiness will be in proportion to their unhappiness and the level of resignation they had while on earth. The certainty that if they shorten their life, they will in fact attain a result exactly opposite to what they were hoping for. That they free themselves from one evil to incur one that is worse, longer, and more dreadful. That they are fooling themselves if they believe that by killing themselves, they will go to heaven more quickly. That suicide is an obstacle to being reunited in the other world with the objects of their affections, and whom they had hoped to meet there again. From whence follows the conclusion that suicide, bringing nothing but disappointment, is against their best interests. Therefore, the number of suicides prevented by Spiritism has been considerable. And one may conclude from this fact that when everyone is a Spiritist, there will be no more conscious suicides. Thus, comparing the results between materialist and Spiritist doctrines solely from the suicide point of view, we find that the logic of the former leads to suicide, whereas the logic of the latter deters it, which is a fact confirmed by experience. To suffer well or badly. When Christ said, "Blessed are the afflicted, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven," he was not referring to those who suffer in general, since everyone on the earth suffers, whether upon the throne or upon straw. But alas, few suffer well. Few understand that only trials that are borne well can lead them to the kingdom of God. Discouragement is a fault. God refuses you consolation because you lack courage. Prayer is a support for the soul, but it is not enough. It must be based on a living faith in God's goodness. You have often been told that God does not put heavy burdens on weak shoulders. The burden is proportional to the strength, just as the reward will be proportional to the resignation and courage. the reward will be greater than the affliction is painful. However, one must merit that reward. And that is why life is full of tribulations. The soldier who is not sent to the front is discontent, because the repose of the barracks doesn't bring him a promotion. So then, be like the soldier, and do not desire a repose in which your body would weaken and your soul would become numb. Be content when God sends you into battle. This battle is not one of gunfire, but the bitterness of life, where sometimes more courage is needed than in bloody combat. Since those who remain firm before the enemy might weaken under the duress of mental pain. Humans are not rewarded for this kind of courage, but God reserves victory laurels and a glorious place for them. When a reason for trouble or vexation touches you, try to lift yourself above it. And when you have managed to control the impulses of impatience, anger, or despair, say to yourself with just satisfaction, I was the stronger. Blessed are the afflicted may be translated thusly. Blessed are those who have the opportunity to test their faith, firmness, perseverance, and submission to God's will, for they will receive 100 times the joy they lacked on earth, and after labor will come repose. Evil and its remedy. Is your earth, then, a place of joy, a paradise of delights? Does not the voice of the prophet resound any longer in your ears? Did he not proclaim that there would be weeping and gnashing of teeth for those who are born into this valley of pain? You who have gone to live there must therefore expect burning tears and bitter suffering. But no matter how acute and deep your suffering may be, look up to heaven and bless the Lord for having willed to test you. O people, do you acknowledge power of your Master only when he has healed the sores of your body and crowned your days with beatitude and joy? Do you acknowledge his love only when he has adorned your body with all sorts of glories and he has restored its brilliance and purity? You must imitate the one who was given to you as the example. Having reached the ultimate degree of abjection and misery, and while laying upon the dung heap, he said to God, Lord, I have known all the joys of opulence, and you have reduced me to the most absolute misery. Thank you, my God, for having willed to test your servant so. How long will your gaze remain fixed upon the horizons limited by death? When will your soul finally desire to leap beyond the limits of the grave? Even if you had to weep and suffer an entire lifetime, what would that be when compared to the eternal glory reserved for those who have endured their trials with faith, love, and resignation? So seek consolation for your ills in the future that God has prepared for you, and seek the cause of your ills in the past. And you, who suffer the most, consider yourselves the blessed of this earth. In your state as discarnates, when you were gliding through space, you yourselves chose your trial because you believed you were strong enough to bear it. So why complain now? You who asked for riches and glory, It was forbearing the struggle of temptation and overcoming it. You who asked to struggle in body and soul against moral and physical evil, it was because you knew that the harder the trial, the greater and more glorious the victory would be. And that if you emerged triumphant, even if your body was thrown onto a dung heap, at death it would release a soul with unblemished radiance, made pure by the baptism of expiation and suffering. What remedy, therefore, is recommended for those who are attacked by cruel obsessions and excruciating ills? Only one is infallible: faith, turning your gaze toward heaven. If in the turmoil of your cruelest suffering, your voice would sing to the Lord, the angel at your bedside would show you the sign of salvation and the place you will someday occupy. Faith is the sure remedy for suffering. It always points to the horizons of the infinite, before which the few dark days of the present are erased. Therefore, do not ask us what remedy should be employed to remedy this ulcer or that sore, this temptation or that trial. Remember that those who believe are strengthened by the remedy of faith, and those who doubt its effectiveness, even for 1 second, are immediately punished because they experience in the same instant the pungent anguish of affliction. The Lord has set his seal upon all those who believe in him. Christ told you that with faith you can move mountains. And I say to you that those who suffer and have faith as a support will be placed under his watch care and will suffer no more. The moments of greatest pain will be for them the first happy notes of eternal joy. Their soul will disengage itself from the body in such a way that while the body is still writhing in convulsions, it will be gliding through the heavenly regions, singing with the angels hymns of thanksgiving and glory to the Lord. Happy are they who suffer and weep. May their souls rejoice, for God will fill them with blessing. May peace and light guide you until our journey continues next time on the Spiritist Path.